Hey everybody, I'm Little Red Riding Hood, and today I'm visiting the Colorado Wolf and Wildlife Center to dispel some myths that might have been caused by one of my stories. So we're talking about big bad wolves, and of course you're probably familiar with the big bad wolf that came out and supposedly ate my grandma. But I promise you she's absolutely fine. She definitely has not been eaten by any wolves. But unfortunately, a lot of the stories from ancient times have been misconstrued, and they've been falsified, and they've been glorified. Kind of like if you go fishing and you catch a little fish, over time that story turns into a really big fish. The same thing happens with a lot of our Little Red Riding Hood stories. So today I want to talk about Micah and Kiara to dispel the big bad wolf myth. So there's really no such thing as the big bad wolf. Now, wolves are big animals, they're predators, but they're definitely not as big as people make them out to be. In fact, they only weigh about 110 pounds for boys, like Mike, and they only weigh about 70 pounds for girls like Kiara here. So they're really not big. Now, are they bad? Well, that's all perception. So wolves aren't necessarily bad. They're just a big predator, and people can sometimes be afraid of them. But here's a fact. Over the last 150 years, only 2 people have been killed by wolves in North America, and neither one of them were my grandma. But unfortunately, people see movies like The Grey, and they think that wolves are out to get them. They're really mean. They're never portrayed in a good light. I mean, even the story about me and the wolf, they never were portrayed in the right or good light. So I think wolves get the big bad blame because people don't understand them. They're afraid of them because they're a big predator with big teeth, but that doesn't mean that they're bad animals. They're just out there trying to live. So maybe sometimes they might eat somebody's cow, but that's what they're being raised for anyway. And in fact, disease kills a lot more cows than wolves ever would. In fact, in Oregon, back in 2012, only 4 cows were killed by wolves in the whole state, and more than a dozen were killed in a rollover accident on their way to being killed for food. So wolves are the smallest amount of the problem when it comes to livestock losses. Sometimes people are afraid that they eat all the deer or all the elk, but they don't. In fact, they keep the deer and the elk herds very healthy. So we need them in our ecosystems, and we need to treat them fairly. Another question that sometimes people wonder about wolves is if the Arctic wolves, like beautiful Akela here, like to eat their food frozen. Now, just because wolves, like Arctic wolves, are from the frozen north, doesn't necessarily mean they like their food to be frozen. However, with subarctic temperatures, oftentimes the food that they do take down will freeze. And they're not going to just leave it there to rot. So they will eat it, even if it is frozen, but they do prefer their food to be fresh. Sometimes people wonder how wolves communicate. Now, not only do they communicate through howling or sometimes even a bark if they're afraid, but they also communicate mostly through body language. So that can mean anything from their body being stiff to with their tails raised. Sometimes their hackles will be up, or their lips being tightened if they're afraid of something, or they feel like they're going to challenge another wolf. But that's really about how much wolves communicate with each other and also with people. They're really great at giving you great body language and warning signs through that way. Now, some people might be wondering why I'm not in with the wolves today. And I think it's probably the same reason why the Little Red Riding Hood story started out to be a pretty bad story in the end, because wolves are very curious and they love to steal things. In particular, they like loose clothing that flows in the wind like a cape. So we're not in there today because we want to make sure that the wolves get a positive image and we don't continue the Little Red Riding Hood bad wolf image. Sometimes we get a lot of questions, especially from kids, if they could have a wolf as a pet. Now, of course, they're absolutely beautiful. And this guy, he looks very familiar because he's probably the same wolf that you would see in a lot of films that would include Red Riding Hood and the big bad black wolf. But when it comes to wolves as pets, it's really not a good idea, because even though they look a lot like dogs and sometimes they act a little bit like dogs, they're completely different. And sadly, a lot of times people will get a wolf or a wolf dog and they think, well, if I raise it just like my dog, he'll act like one. And it might work out for about the first year or so. But unfortunately, wolves are completely different from your domestic dogs because they don't grow out of any kind of destructive behaviors. They actually grow into them. You can't housebreak them, you really can't train them, so they're really not good pets. Now, wolves belong in the wild, and that's where we prefer that they stay. One of the questions that was submitted to the Colorado Wolf and Wildlife Center was, how do foxes play? And foxes play kind of similar to the wolves, but they're a little bit more independent. They don't really live in packs or groups, except for in captivity, so that doesn't mean they don't have fun. What does the fox say? No wait, that's not what the fox says. Foxes actually have a really wide range of vocalizations, including anything from something really terrifying called the vixen scream to a little bark, almost to what sounds like birds chirping. Again, everybody, I'm Little Red Riding Hood, and I'm here at the Colorado Wolf and Wildlife Center to dispel the big bad wolf myths. This was our weekly wolf blog. It was our kids blog, and we hope that you will join us again next week for the next weekly wolf blog. If you have any questions, be sure to let the kind folks at Colorado Wolf and Wildlife Center know about them.